Our first speaker is Brenda Clark-Hamilton, is a dynamic keynote speaker who offers fresh perspective in leadership, communication, team building, change management, and offering one's personal best to life, relationships, and career. Brenda's career experience includes coordinating professional development for 1,200 Iowa teachers. Her 2018 speaking venues included 3 trips to Colorado Springs to provide professional development for the United States Olympic Committee. Please welcome me in welcoming Brenda.
Honored to be here. I'd like to start by getting you involved right away. Please turn to someone next to you. Find someone intelligent close by. This should not be difficult. Oops, one back. And I'd like you to tell that person one thing that you do well in your life. Meaning you have like 1 minute to brag about yourself to the person next to you. This is not an option. It is a requirement. Everybody should be bragging. That includes teachers, coaches that are here. Everybody should be bragging about yourself. Awesome. If you could please start to wrap up that thought. Please wrap up that thought. First of all, I would like to say a very special thanks to the Ed Thomas Family Foundation for inviting me to be a part of this Leadership Academy. As most adults in the state of Iowa, or maybe around the nation, I certainly had heard of Ed Thomas and heard of his legacy and heard of the tragic death of Ed Thomas and what an amazing man he was. But after Al invited me to be a part of this, I did much more research on my own and watched a lot of online videos and information. And since I've been here, I've spent quite a bit of time with his widow, Jan, and met Aaron and his wife, and Al and Deb, good friends of theirs. And these people are just delightful people, and their hearts are in the right place. And it's just so awesome to see that despite the fact that Ed's death was cut short, that the legacy lives on, and thousands of students are impacted in a positive way. So again, thank you for joining us. It's just an absolute honor to be here today. Title of my particular presentation is Bring It On. Create a you that you can feel proud of. And this graphic was not chosen by happenstance, the idea of a little kitty looking in a pool and seeing a big tiger. What I do speak at about 100 events a year all over the nation. And because of that, I do a lot of reading and research on what it is that really fulfills people. That if you want to have great joy and great success and have amazing things happen in your life, I can tell you a lot of times it boils down to making the type of decisions, treating others with care and respect and concern, and doing the right thing, where at the end of the day, you can look in the mirror and you can say, I feel good about who I was today. I feel good about the choices I made. I feel good about how I treated other people. I feel good about the direction my life is headed. So much of when people talk about where does self-esteem come from, it comes from that. Just saying, I treated people well. I have a purpose in my life to make this world a better place and to live out that mission in life. So that's what I'm going to be talking about in this opening session this morning. We are indeed going to learn some great stuff throughout the Leadership Academy. In my session, we're going to hit 4 different pieces. First of all, we're going to talk about how you can create an identity that you can feel proud of. Second of all, we're going to talk about tapping the power of the 93% in your life, and I'll explain what that means. Then we'll go into stepping back from challenges, setbacks, or things in your life that are not ideal, perhaps you might view as a failure. And finally, we'll talk about dreaming big and then putting in the work to make those dreams come true. Okay? Any questions before we get rolling? All right, well, let's start with the first thing. I want you to think of when people talk about you behind your back, which they do. People say, do you know so-and-so? Do you know Aaron? Do you know Kelly, who I understand has a bunch of groupies here from Appleton, Parkersburg? When people talk about you behind your back, I want you to think to yourself for a moment, what are 2 or 3 words or phrases that you hope people would use to describe you? And this goes for our adults in the audience as well. When people talk about you, what would you hope people would say? Not what you think they say about you, but what would, in your ideal world, what are 2 or 3 words or phrases you would hope people would use to describe you? And I'd ask you again, but you may have to step out your comfort zone, to just turn to someone next to you if you'd be willing and share with them what are two or three words or phrases you would hope people would use to describe you. You have about a couple minutes, a minute or two to do this. Okay, if you could please start to wrap that up. I have a microphone, and I'm wondering if I could have a few volunteers who'd be willing to say 2 or 3 words or phrases you would hope people would use to describe you. Everybody's closing into themselves real quickly. Yes, ma'am. So would you be willing to stand?
Yes.
And tell us where you're from?
Clear Lake.
Okay. And how would you hope people would describe you?
God-loving and caring.
God loving and caring. Very nice. Thank you. Thank you. Do we have another one? Sir.
Can I say who I am?
Yeah, please. Who you are and where you're from?
I'm Cooper. I'm from Dow Center Grimes. I would say kind and integrity, like a man of integrity.
All right. You're honest, trustworthy. Excellent. We have another one. Love to hear from a couple more. Yes, sir. I'm coming your way. Thank you.
I'm Ethan. I'm from Red Oak, Iowa, and I'd say probably kind and respectful.
Very nice. I'd like to hear from one of the adults in the room. As you two point to each other. I hear a what the heck, why me look. Which one do you guys think should do it? All right.
I'm just kidding. My name is Dana Sullivan, and I'm from Charles City. I would hope that they would say I'm persistent and intelligent.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, the reason I had you all share that, Marshall Goldsmith is a management expert. And he says if you want to be a great leader in life, you need to understand that you actually have, is this a problem with that sentence? That's okay. You actually have 4 identities in life. And he says if you want to be a great leader, you need to understand the difference between the 4 identities and the fact that each one of us has 4 separate identities. The first identity he refers to is your remembered identity. Remembered is what you remember you were like in the past. Let me take a little survey. How many of you remember being shy children? You were shy. You were timid as a child. Okay. How many of you remember being outgoing as a child? How many of you young women remember being tomboys as a child? And maybe you still are. That is part of your remembered identity. It's what you remember about yourself. That's the first identity he says you need to know about, is what you remember about yourself. The second identity is reflected identity. I swear it's going to come up. Oh, there it goes. Second identity is reflected identity. Reflected identity is what people say you were like in the past. What people say that you were like in the past. Let me give you an example. People will say, Jack, I remember when you were a little kid, you were always working in the garage with your dad. You, sir, your name? Troy, you were always chasing the girls around the neighborhood back in the day. Brian, I didn't think you were going to graduate high school. Joe, you were a hellraiser in high school. Al, it's a wonder they let you back in the school. Reflected is what people say you were like in the past. And people always say, oh, I remember you. You were like blah, 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 blah. The third identity is programmed. And to me, this identity is a scary one. Programmed is people's prediction for who you're going to be in the future. It's programmed as people's prediction for who you're going to be in the future. And I say it's a scary identity because sometimes people predict good things for your future, and sometimes people predict not so good things. I had worked with a group of students with Job Corps of Iowa in Ottumwa. And if you're not familiar, there's 2 programs in Iowa, one in Denison, one in Ottumwa. It's a federally funded program where students, usually 16 to 24 years old, are removed from their homes and neighborhoods to actually live on campus at one of, like at Indian Hills Community College in Ottumwa for a couple of years. And usually they're removed, not always, but much of the time, there are difficult home situations. It could be abuse. It could be neglect. It could be drug use. It could be gang violence in the neighborhood and the students taking part of that. And so they actually live on campus and they learn new life skills and they learn to take up a trade and whatnot, and they get surrounded by new mentors. I was working with a group of Job Corps students and we were talking about identity, and one of them said, oh, I get programmed identity. Programmed, your prediction for the future. He said, he was from Des Moines. And he said, my dad's in prison for drug dealing, has been in prison for many years, and my mother's a meth addict. And he said, I swear to you, growing up, I heard my mom say 100 times to me, son, you're going to grow up to be a no-good, deadbeat, druggy loser just like your father. Can you imagine growing up with that little prediction hanging over your head, going through adolescence? Programmed for failure. Thankfully, a lot of you, when you graduate from high school, people are going to program you for success. They're going to say, honey, you are going to set the world on fire. I cannot wait to see the amazing things that you do in your life. Programmed for success. But the last of the identities to me is the most important. It's your created identity. Created identity is who you choose to be from this day forward. Let me repeat that. Who you choose to be from this day forward is your created identity. Let me explain that a little more. Created identity says, I don't care who I've been in the past. Up until this moment in time, there is nothing I can do to change the choices I've made up until this time. I can't change the past, so I don't really care who I've been in the past. I don't care what other people say I was like or what their prediction is for my future. I don't care what they say I'm like right now. Created identity says it is my choice starting today that this is who I choose to be from this day forward. And I'm making a conscious choice to be this person. And it starts with those 2 words or phrases that give you some indication of who you'd like to be. Like from this day forward, I choose to be creative. I choose to be a person of integrity. I choose to be a person of honesty. I encourage you strongly to create your own identity. What I started a few years ago, about 5 years ago, and to me it was just instinctive why I did it. I created a list of 5 or 6 words or phrases that I wanted to live out in my life, my created identity, who I wanted to be as a person. And I put it on a sticky note next to my office desk. And then I started putting it in my presentation bag when I traveled. And what I would do, I stay in hotels about 50 nights a year. We just added that up from last year. It's a little scary. And what I started doing was before I'd go out to speak, when I'd get all my bags on and grab the hotel room door to go out for the day to do my work, I would stop and I'd repeat in my head my 5 words or phrases. And I'm a spiritual person, and so I would say it in a prayer form, and I still do it every day. In a prayer form, I want to be, and I list my created identity, who I want to be. And what I say every day is the same. Help me be loving, kind, joyful, genuine, inspirational, and then out the door I go. Why do I consciously repeat those words of who I want to be? It keeps me focused on who I want to be. So when I'm having one of these days where I'm feeling grumpy and irritable and just nasty, like I want to take somebody's head off, I stop and say, that is not who you want to be, Brenda. This is who you want to be. I can only imagine, I started that at 50 years old. I can only imagine the power of starting at 16 or 17 years old and saying, this is a choice of who I want to be in the future, what that is going to make happen in your life. That's your created identity. The other thing I would add on is a strong encouragement when you think about what your created identity is to make being a kind person a part of that identity. Just to be a kind person. I understand that one of Ed Thomas's phrases and beliefs was do what's right. There is something very, very powerful when we adults who may not have gotten everything right, when we see a young person do something that we go, wow, I wouldn't have thought to do that, but that was really cool. It inspires us. An example, we have 3 sons, and our middle son who's our cross-country runners in here? Do we have a cross-country? Our middle son, Jake, he loved cross country, and he'd train all the time, and they went to state and all this. Our older son, Alex, it really wasn't his passion, but he went out for it the first couple years. And it was really unfortunate for Alex. He had not worked out much that summer. So you know that first meet of the year when he really wasn't ready for prime time. And on top of that, we're a small school, Bishop Garrick High School in Algona, where those first couple meets, they didn't even have enough runners because a couple people were out with injuries to make a full varsity team. So not only would Alex have been slow in junior varsity, he was forced in one of the meets early on to run varsity, which meant he was going to be way in the back. Way back with the golf cart following him along the way. You know what I'm talking about. Anyway, I was at this meet, and sure enough, my husband and I split up because we're like, oh man, he's going to be way behind. And my husband's like, I'll go out in the woods. You go over here, will you cheer? So someone cheering him on the whole way. And I was by myself with, just there were a couple of people near the end. Alex was one of them running near the end of the thing. I'm going, come on, buddy, you can do this, I know. And pretty soon we start hearing the cheers of the people at the finish line. They're finishing, and we've still got a long way to go around the course. And thinking, crap, they're screaming, and everybody's over there, and they're finishing. And not more than a minute went by from those first runners coming out when one of those early finishers jogged on over, sweaty. It was in August, just sweat through. And he had, I'm going to say cross-country people, if you run 3 miles in late August, as hot as it could be, and you get totally sweated out, what is your reward at most meets that you'll have in your hand? A popsicle. That's your reward. Kelly, would you ever run for 3 miles for a popsicle? No. Anyway, one of those runners, he's all sweaty, and he was obviously one of the top finishers. He jogs on over, sweat through, goes up to those last runners in the race with his popsicle, and he goes, you can do it, guys. I've been there. I've been the last one in the race. I promise it's going to get better. You keep going. Push yourself. You're looking great. You can do this. And as a mother, I wanted to kiss the kid. He wasn't from our school. He wasn't from, I was like, who are you? And I thought he could have sat at the finish line and had everybody go, way to go, buddy, you were first place, you were second place. Instead, he said, you know what I'm going to do with my time? I'm going to go encourage someone who needs a little encouragement. That is what I mean by doing the right thing. Let me put up a few more examples of this. Pictures like these go viral. You may have seen this. These were 2 young women. The one on the right had won at the Ohio State competition of track. She had won the 1,600 meters, and she was running the 3,200 meters when one of the runners collapsed just meters from the finish line. And she said to ESPN, I felt if you get within 5 meters of the finish line at the state championship, you deserve to finish that race. And she stopped and picked her up, and they finished number 14 and number 15 in the race. This was a Florida State football player who they were walking through the school, they were doing some activity or whatever. He sees a young man with autism sitting by himself and says, hey, buddy, can I sit with you? And he said, we had the best conversation. I said, you know what, why don't you and your mom come to a Florida State football game, and we'll even have you do a team dinner with us. There's one more. A young man saw an elderly man crossing the street, and he was working in a restaurant in California. He ran it. The guy was crossing the street in the hail, a very elderly man. He ran and grabbed from his workplace, the restaurant he was at, a large umbrella, ran across the street, and followed this elderly man slowly, just getting drenched the whole time. These things inspire us, and I want you to remember this. We rise by self-esteem. Who has the highest self-esteem? I guarantee it's the ones who are treating everybody with kindness. Not just their friends, not just the popular kids. They are being kind and caring to every person. A little quote related to this. There is overwhelming evidence that the higher the level of self-esteem, the more likely one will be to treat others with respect, kindness, and generosity. Second thing I want to talk about is tap the power of the 93%. And for this, I need a volunteer. I need a young man. Oh, I'm sorry, it has to be, all right, I've got 2. I'll let you, I'm coming to you with a microphone, and I'll deal with both of you together. First of all, young men, your names. Would you stand here and come in the aisle? Okay, tell us your names and your schools.
I'm Carell from Liberty High School.
And I am Isaiah Hall, also from Liberty High School.
Thank you for joining us. Now, gentlemen, do you have some experience with girls, like you understand girls? Oh, yeah. don't need to sit this one out. All right, it's all on you, sir. All right, I'm going to put, you understand the ladies.
Sure, yeah, sure.
Okay, I'm going to put up a picture here of a guy communicating with a girl in high school, and I want you to tell us how you think it's going for him. It's a guy communicating with a girl in high school. How do you think it's going for him? Are you feeling confident?
Yeah, I got you.
All right. Ooh, he's feeling confident. Here it is. You ready? How's it going for him? There it is. How's it going?
Not so good.
All right, let's have some applause. You absolutely passed that test. Excellent. Now, what I want you to notice, how many of you boys in here knew, and men knew, that she was not happy there? I have 3 sons, and I always wonder at what age do little boys figure out she is not happy there, just by her body language. Now, related to this, I want you to all turn to someone next to you right now and speak these exact words. I like your shirt. But I want you to do it in such a way that lets them know, I'm sorry, I'm deficient here now. That I want you to say, I like your shirt, but I want you to do it in such a way that lets them know you're repulsed by the shirt they've chosen to wear today. You think it is the ugliest shirt in the history of shirts, but I want you to say the words, I like your shirt. Everybody turn and say, I like your shirt. Okay, some of you enjoyed that just a little bit too much. Were you guys wearing the same shirt? How did that go? Really good if you're wearing the same shirt. The reason I had to do that, part of our identity is understanding the 93% of communication. This is old research from UCLA, but I continue to share this with, students, with CEOs of companies, you name it, manufacturing supervisors, I don't care who. We all need to know this information. And the research is this. It says when you're communicating with someone, like when I'm communicating with you right now, only 7% of whatever message you're getting from me right now is coming from my actual words. Only 7%. 93% is coming from a combination of 2 things. What are they? Body language is 55%, and tone of voice. I like your shirt. So I've had people say, I don't know why Kelly got so bent out of shape. Come on up here, Kelly. I don't know why Kelly got so bent out of shape. I don't know why Kelly got so bent out of shape. All I did is I walked into Kelly's office and I said, Kelly, I'm totally open to what you have to say. Go ahead, Kelly. I'm open. How am I? No, thank you. You may move on. What was my body language screaming to Kelly? I am angry. I'm closed off. Well, the reason I share this, and again, the research is 7% words, 38% tone of voice, 55% body language. I'm sorry, I'm a little slow on the remote here. Which way? Oh, over there. Oh, you're a genius. Excellent. What I want to talk about here, and I'm going to make this point pretty briefly, is just that part of identity, and if any of you want these slides later, we can, if your teacher emails, or we'll figure out a way. We'll get them to you so you don't have to write this all down. But what the research tells us is that in the U.S. in general, if you want to be received well, if you want teachers, coaches, your girlfriends, parents when you meet them for the first time, college interviewers, if you want them to get a good vibe about you and to say, gosh, there's something about that person, I really like her. I really like him. I think that person has leadership potential. The research tells us this is the type of body language that in the U.S. we respond well to. Oh, you're taking a picture of it is an even better idea. I forget about technology. Even better idea. That the research tells us this is the type of body language we respond well to. This is the type of body language over on the right where people say, I don't know if he has much leadership potential. Let's talk about a few of these on there. The first one is consistent eye contact. A lot of us are shy, and we don't want to stare the person in the eye like we've fallen in love with them. But you can just, when you're talking to someone, you can look around their face a little bit. It's okay to look away and look back. The only thing you should not be doing is when they're talking to you, you're scrolling on your phone or you're texting, right? Eye contact means when you're talking to someone, you're looking at them. You're looking at them, and you're maybe nodding, giving that affirming eye contact and nodding. It means smiling to people. It means having a confident, upright posture. I often said to our sons, who they competed a great deal in speech and music activities, and I often said, when you go alone in that in the room to do your vocal solo, and you are scared to death and your knees are shaking, I always said, you can actually trick your body into feeling more confident by walking in that room, and this is males and females both, legs apart like I stand, firm voice, good morning. My name is Jacob Hamilton. Today I'll be performing. And I always said to the boys, if you have that kind of firm body language and firm tone of voice, it will actually trick your body into feeling more confident. Thank goodness Harvard has caught up with my research on that. And they actually came out, Amy Cuddy came out with a research study that shows that that absolutely happens. What they have done, they've done power poses. Who's heard of power poses? Yeah, where you swab someone's mouth and you check the chemicals in it, and then you have them stand into power pose for 2 minutes and re-swab their mouth. Their testosterone level increases. Testosterone is the bold, manly, I am woman, hear me roar. It's that confidence hormone. It actually increases after 2 minutes of standing in a power pose, and your cortisol, your stress hormone, decreases. Now, those of you who haven't heard of power poses are probably thinking, Brenda, I want to know right away what they are because I want to do this. You might want to do these in private, and you'll understand for a moment. One is the Wonder Woman pose. You get the idea. Stand confident, stand strong. I'll hit the others on here. Expressive face. Have you ever had an incident where you tell someone something you think is pretty funny and their face never moves? We like expressive faces. Uncrossed arms. I had a man at a conference, he came up to me and he said, Brenda, I got to tell you. He said, I have been banned from my boss from sitting in our staff meetings like this. He said, you may not sit in our staff meetings like this anymore. He said, but I've got a little tummy. It's like a little shelf here. It's comfortable for me. Why? This tends to most people to appear closed off. It does. One more example that for some of you with scholarships and whatnot, a couple years ago, I was taking our middle son on college visits. And we got back in the car after the visit, and I said, Jake, did you notice how you were sitting when we met with the physics instructor and that admissions person? And Jake said, no. And I said, well, in both of them, you were sitting in the meetings leaning back in your chair with your arms crossed. And I said, maybe you were cold, maybe you were nervous. I said, that's fine. But when we go back on campus for those scholarship competition days, and you're competing with other smart kids for major scholarship dollars, and part of that is being interviewed by an alumnus of a college, an administrative faculty member, I said, don't you dare sit in that interview like this. How might they view an 18-year-old sitting in a scholarship competition interview like this? Don't care. Cocky, I don't need this. My mom's making me do this. And I said, I know you well enough to know, Jake, you wouldn't intentionally want to send that message, but you might accidentally send that message. All right, the third thing that I want to talk about is stepping up from setbacks, challenges, and mistakes. Some of the adults might be familiar with a song by Bono called Stuck in a Moment by U2. Came out in the early 2000s. And the refrain of the song is you've got to get yourself together. You've got yourself stuck in a moment, and you can't get out of it. You've got to get yourself together. You've got yourself stuck in a moment, and you can't get out of it. And there were 2 music videos, and the early one is hard to find. But it's of a football championship game. We assume a high school championship. And the game is tied. And there's like 30 seconds left in the game. And all this has to happen is the kicker has to kick the ball, to score a field goal, and he will be the hero of the town, and everybody's going to be cheering. So as he's going to kick this, U2 is singing, Bono's singing, you got to get yourself together. You've got yourself stuck in a moment, and you can't get out of it. And he goes up to kick in slow motion, and as he's kicking in slow-mo, the crowd, everybody's going, woo, to see if it goes in. And covers it as a husband, as a father, as an employee. I'm a failure. What I want to say, and I may be the worst motivational speaker in the world to say this, but you are going to mess up sometimes in life. You are going to screw up. You are going to have times, and for the perfect adult, please raise your hand. I didn't think so. If you ask any adult in this room to say, have you ever had failures or screw-ups in your life? If they're honest with you, they will say, oh, heck yeah. Embarrassing things, moral failings, times when I screwed up. The trick, though, is to not be defined by that low moment. When that thing happens, the choice is, are you going to let it destroy you for life and define you and get stuck in that moment? Or are you going to say, you know what, I'm going to learn from this experience? Some of you might have heard of this analogy of the donkey in the well. If you're an animal lover in here, you might want to snuggle up to next one for a group hug because it's a little sad story. But it's a fable, it's not a true story. And as the fable goes, a farmer had an old donkey, and he was withering and really aged, and the donkey fell down into an old dry well. And he was way down in the well, and he was stuck down in there, and he was kicking and braying and making all sorts of noise, and the farmer was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I can't get him out of here. I don't have equipment or whatever. So finally the farmer decides maybe the most humane thing will be to just call in all his neighbors and shovel in and fill up the hole with dirt so that no one else can fall in the well, and so that the donkey, that will be his final burial place. So he calls all his neighbors, and they all gather around, and they're shoveling dirt down there, and the donkey is kicking and braying and raising a fuss, and they keep shoveling, and the farmer's upset, but they keep shoveling, and finally the donkey quits making noise, and they know he has met his demise. And the farmer says to his neighbors, why don't you sit down and get a drink of water? And he looks down in the well to see how much farther he has before the hole is filled up. And what does he see? The donkey. When dirt was being shoveled on his back, rather than letting it cover him up, he would take whatever dirt was on his back, and the donkey would shake it off and then use that dirt to raise him to the next level. Another load would come, and he'd shake off that dirt and say, okay, use that, and he'd raise a little higher. And he was standing in the well looking up at the farmer as if, hey, could you shovel a little faster? I'm not quite to the top yet. There's a lesson in that I hope you remember for the rest of your life. When dirt comes at you, and some of you may feel like dirt has already come at me. I did not grow up. I am not in an ideal home. My parents are not perfect parents, and not even close. Unfair things have happened to me in my life. And I think we all have a choice in saying, are you going to let that cover you up? Are you going to use that experience to help raise you higher? This is an interesting little study that says that some of us, we're going along life functioning at a normal level. And the challenge comes. And for many people, they're dropped down to a level of survival for the rest of their life, where they barely get out of bed for the rest of their life. They barely can function. Other people, they have the tragedy comes along. They drop down to survival, but eventually they recover and function at a level they were before in their life. But this last one blew me away. There are some people, they drop down at the trial to survival, but ultimately they use that trial to help them function at a higher level in their life than they ever would have before the trial. And I think of people like Oprah Winfrey and spiritual teacher Joyce Meyer, who were sexually abused as children. And they say, had it not been for that horrific experience, I would not be where I am today, ministering to millions. I think of the Ed Thomas Family Foundation. You would not be sitting here, sadly, if it were for the tragic, horrific death of Ed Thomas. That means using something horrific and saying, you know what? I'm going to use that to raise me to the higher level. All right, the last thing I want to talk to you about is dreaming big, then putting in the effort to make that happen. Just checking my time, about 11 minutes. All right, we're good. I'd like to turn to someone next to you and answer this question. Do you have a dream? What would be your big dream in life? Everybody turn to someone real quickly and answer that. What would be your big dream in life? All right, if you can please wrap that up. I hope you have a big dream, and my last thing I want to talk about here is big dreams. Do we have any other English teachers in the room? I'm the only former English teacher in the, oh my gosh. Well, every year I taught at Cedar Rapids Regis High School back when it was a high school. And back then, it was about every February that we were at the point in American literature for the juniors in high school that we covered Henry David Thoreau's Walden. And this was one of his most famous quotes from Walden that says, if you have built your castles in the air, your work need not be lost. That is where they should be. Now put the foundations under them. And our high school boys and girls basketball teams were very competitive and often went to the state tournaments at that time. And so we would talk about the fact that at the start of the season, you built your castle in the air, that you were going to go to the state tournament in Des Moines, or maybe win the state. You built this big castle. And the rest of the season has been starting from the basics of let's get physically in shape to endure the game. Let's review dribbling and passing and some basic plays. And basically, you build this big castle, and then you say, okay, there's got to be a whole lot of steady foundations put under here for this castle to hold. And I said, you've been doing that all year so that you can try to build this castle. Well, little did I know that sitting in my class, my first year of teaching in that junior class, was someone who had a big castle dream of his own. He was our high school quarterback. And he was just the nicest kid, honest to God. He was so pleasant. He was very conscientious, just delightful to be around, nice to everybody, never cocky. And he was a good quarterback. And ultimately, after he graduated high school, he was hoping to play some college ball. So he went to UNI thinking, I will probably get some playing time. It's not as big as University of Iowa or somewhere like that. So he went to UNI and he sat the bench for 3 years. The fourth year, he finally got an opportunity to play, and he did phenomenally. Well, when most people graduated from high school, they went into a business career or whatever. But this student of mine said, I want to try out for the NFL someday. That's my castle in the air. I want to try out for the NFL. And so he started, and this will clue you into, some of you are going to know who I'm talking about, that he started working at a Hy-Vee, stocking shelves, making $5.50 an hour. Has anyone heard of? I'll keep going on here. And he would be stocking shelves, and people would say, what you doing? And he's like, someday I'm going to play in the NFL. And they're like, yeah, right, stock boy. He eventually played quite a bit for the Iowa Barnstormers and was amazing. And he had several opportunities to try out for different sports teams like the Chicago Bears. But each time something horrific happened, or he wouldn't get on the team, or he'd get on the team immediately cut. At one point, he had a good tryout, a good chance with the Chicago Bears, but he went on his honeymoon the week before. On his honeymoon, he was stung by a spider on his throwing arm. And it swelled up, and he couldn't do it. Well, in the fall of 1999, after 10 years post-high school, the St. Louis Rams picked him up. And their quarterback was injured in one of the early games, and they put in my student to play quarterback. And they won the game. And they won the next week's game. And they won the next week's game. And then he appeared on Sports Illustrated. This is October of 1999. And the heading is, who is this guy? No one had ever heard of him. They're like, who the heck is it? For those of you who know who this is, who is it? Kurt Warner. He ended up taking his team, started all season, took them to the Super Bowl. They won the Super Bowl. He was named the Super Bowl's most valuable player. He ended up having an amazingly stellar career in football, is now a commentator for the NFL. He does a lot of charitable work. More importantly, he was on Dancing with the Stars, most importantly. And he was inducted in the NFL Football Hall of Fame. Point I want to make in this, dream big. Build your castles in the air. But don't forget to put the foundation under them. It takes a lot of grit and a lot of hard work to make a dream come true. Grit, from Angela Duckworth of University of Pennsylvania. Grit is the trait that says, if you knock me down 5 times, oh, you watch me come up 6. You knock me down 20 times, I'll be back for another 30 times. And that's what it takes to succeed if you have a big dream. Another thing to think about, I keep turning around. Be humble but not intimidated. I've always loved that about Kurt, that he's humble, he never brags. That's why people love him, and everybody loves Kurt. They're like, what a great guy, he never brags. But Kurt was never intimidated on the football field. How many of you, by a show of hands, would like to go on after high school and get some additional schooling? College, something. I can tell you my boys came from little Algona, Iowa, which is a small town. And they said it gets a little intimidating. You go to college, and you've got these kids from suburban Chicago whose moms and dads are both lawyers, and they're like, you mean you haven't been playing in the cello since you were 3 years old? Are you kidding? You haven't been doing geometry classes, enrichment classes since you were 4? And our sister said, it's a little intimidating. But after a while, they learn, we small town Iowa people, we can compete. My middle son, Jake, is in grad school on a full-ride research scholarship for engineering in New York right now. He interned last summer at MIT. I said, MIT? My God, how'd you get that, Jake? And he said, they like the fact I'm from the Midwest. We're common sense. We're hard workers. We know what the heck we're doing. We're frugal. If they sent me to present at a conference, I don't charge a $500 bill to their ticket. They love us, Midwesterners. I would encourage you to be humble, but not intimidated. Last couple things here, and then I know I need to wrap up here. Appreciate those. You may have talents and coaches that see something in you that you don't even see in yourself that could make a dramatic difference in your life. I had a teacher very early on who said, when I was so shy, said, I see something in you where you could be in front of a group of people. He's a high school teacher, and I said, Mr. Foss, that's not me. He said, I think it is you. And who knows, all these years later, I think Mr. Foss was right. Appreciate those people. And finally, choose to live with mojo. If there was one slide, if people would say, Brenda, what is one slide that would sum up how you can be successful in life, I would choose this one. To choose to live with mojo, not nojo. Mojo is this left-hand column, that gold. Mojo is when you show up for school, you show up for leadership, you show up for your job teachers, and you're like, mojo, I am wide awake, I'm ready to go. Might be a little tired because this bus left, our Suburban left at 4 o'clock this morning, for God's sake. But I'm wide awake. I'm going to learn what I can. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to be here. I'm thankful for my teachers for taking the time out. I'm going to learn what I can. I'm wide awake. I'm ready to go. Nojo, we have adults and students who show up every day with Nojo. They walk in the door and they're like, oh, another sucky day of life. I want you to think of what percentage of the time do you show up with mojo and do you show up with nojo. It will impact your entire life, I promise you. All right, I need to wrap up because Kelly's going to whip me off the stage here in about 1 minute. He told me he's going to get an electronic buzzer that just, you go overboard. I want to know, what is one point that you will remember from this session? Let me grab my microphone. To me, this is most important. One point you'll remember from the session. Raise your hand if you have something you remember. Yes, sir.
I need to say who I am.
Yeah, please.
I'm Drew. I'm from DCG, and I'll probably remember build your castles in the air and then build the foundation under it.
Yes, and you'll say, and that is from Walden, Henry David Thoreau, and your English teacher will love you. Another point. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Taylor from Clear Lake High School, and I'll probably remember We Rise by Lifting Others by Robert Ingersoll.
Awesome. Let's have one more. One more. Someone near the front. Thank you.
I'm Grace, and I'm from AP, and I think I would remember the 4 identities, but the most important one is the one we're creating.
Awesome. Thank you. I have a final 2-minute story, 1 minute. May I go over by 1 minute? Is that okay? Mark says, yes, thank you, Mark. We love you for that. I'm going to close with a quick story. One of the castles and dreams in my life, like I said, I've been a high school teacher, and I went into eventually the training of teachers. Come on. We need this to change, Kelly. It's not changing for me. Okay, thank you. I'd been a high school English teacher and went into the training of teachers. And my big dream that I had, my castle for many years, is I thought it'd be amazing to start my own business doing workplace training on leadership and communication skills and motivational stuff. And that would be, and if I got a chance to speak at a conference, oh my God, it'd be too much to handle. And so in 2005, I was turning 40. My husband and I talked, and he said, you know, you're not getting any younger. Thank you, Chris. It's a good time to do it. We can afford to have a little lesser income. And I agreed. I said, if there's a time I'm going to launch this business, this is as good as any. So I created on my home computer a little brochure that says, this is who I am, this is what I can train on. And I identified about 15 businesses around our small town of Algona that I thought might hire a workplace trainer. And so I had this mailing all ready to go in September of that year. It was stacked, and the next morning I was going to drive to the post office, and I started crying. And it was not a happy cry. And my husband's been with me for 31 years, and he knows me well, and he said, what is wrong? Why are you crying? You've been wanting this. This is your big dream. You're launching your big dream after 20 years. Aren't you excited? I said, Chris, I just feel so out there. Tomorrow I'm going to send these brochures to people I know around town. I said, what if they look at it and they say, what a dumb idea? Or who does she think she is? I said, or worse yet, what if I send these brochures out, I launch my big dream business, and no one calls, and my big dream just fuzzles down to nothing. I'm just a big failure. I said, I don't want to send them out. And he said, you don't have to. You put them in a drawer. You can throw them away. I don't care what you do. He said, but I got a question for you before you do that. He said, can you live with not knowing? He said, you're 40 now. You got some good genes in your mom's side. Your grandma just lived to 105. Chances are good you could live another 40, 50, 60 years. He said, can you live every day for the rest of your life not knowing what might have happened had you sent out those brochures? Can you live with not knowing? And I went to our bedroom that night, and I was crying, and I prayed, and I came out, and I said, I've got to know. One way or the other, if I look like an idiot, I got to know. And I drove through the Algona drive-through post office the next day. My hands were literally shaking as I put the envelopes in there, and I thought, here goes nothing. About a day later, the general manager of Algona Municipal Utilities called and asked me to do some workplace training. I worked with local companies for 2 years and then got my foot in the door to speak at a conference in Des Moines, and the whole thing exploded large. I speak at now about 100 events a year, all over the place. I was in Virginia 2 weeks ago. I'll be in New Mexico 2 weeks from now. I'm all over the place. Last year I added to my client list, and I'll be back with them this year, the U.S. Olympic Committee. And when I'm on, they don't let me near the athletes because I'm a klutz. But I work with a lot of the coaching staff, and I can tell you when I'm on campus, I pinch myself and I think, what if I had wimped out? What if I had gone out of the bedroom that night and said to Chris, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. It would have been so easy to do. So that's what I would leave you with. If you have a big dream, something you want to accomplish in life, maybe you want to try out for speech in high school and everybody's going to go, you trying out for speech? What are you thinking? I encourage you to ask yourself, hey, can you live with not knowing? Can you live with not knowing? So anyway, thank you for your great attention. I'm sorry I ran over. I don't know who I went over on, but I'm someone. I'm sorry. Thank you.
All right, that was a great way to open the day. We're going to go ahead and do let's do 7-minute break real quick. So let's get back in here at 10:08. Restrooms are right out here, and then be back in here. And we're going to do a selfie when you get back with everybody, all right?